But the neoconservatives were now increasingly locked into this fantasy. And next, they set out to uncover the network in America itself.
This is a network that has penetrated into some 60 countries, including very definitely our own, and it's got to be rooted out. Our intelligence priority in many ways is getting after the network here in the United States first. We will do whatever we need to do to go after these networks and dismantle them.
The American government set out to search for the al-Qaeda organization inside its own country. Thousands were detained as all branches of the law and the military were told to look for terrorists.
You don't really know what a terrorist looks like, what kind of car they drive, or anything else, so it's just basically everything and everybody and anything out here.
And bit by bit, the government found the network, a series of hidden cells in cities across the country, from Buffalo to Portland.
We've thwarted terrorists in Buffalo, and Seattle, Portland, Detroit, North Carolina, and Tampa, Florida. We're determined to stop the enemy before he can strike our people.
The Americans called them sleeper cells and asserted that they had just been waiting to strike. But in reality, there is very little evidence that any of those arrested had anything at all to do with terrorist plots. From Portland to the suburb of Buffalo called Lackawanna, yet again the Americans were chasing a phantom enemy.
Haas is also a member of the Defense Department's National Security Study Group at the Pentagon. Robert Zoellick, U.S. Trade Representative, a cabinet-level position. He is also one of the more hawkish pro-Israel Siberia in the Bush Jr. administration, who advocated invading Iraq and occupying a portion of the country in order to set up a Vichy-style puppet government. He consistently advocates going to war against Iran. Ari Fleischer, ex-White House spokesman for the Bush Jr. administration, prominent in the Siberia community. Some reports state that he holds Israeli citizenship. Fleischer is closely connected to the extremist Siberia called the Chabad Lubavitch Hasidics, who follow the Kabbalah and hold very extremist and insulting views on Siberia. Fleischer was the co-president of Chabad's Capital Siberia Forum. He received the Young Leadership Award from the American Friends of Lubavitch in October 2001. James Schlesinger, one of the many Pentagon advisors. Schlesinger also sits on the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board under Pearl and is another extremist pro-Israel advisor who supported going to war against Iraq. Schlesinger is also a commissioner of the Defense Department's National Security Study Group at the Pentagon. David Frum, White House speechwriter behind the Axis of Evil label, he lumped together all the lies and accusations against Iraq for Bush to justify the war. Joshua Bolten, White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Bolton was previously a banker, former legislative aide, and prominent in the Siberia community. John Bolton, former UN representative and Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. Bolton is also a senior advisor to President Bush. Prior to this position, Bolton was senior vice president of the above-mentioned pro-Israel think tank, AEI. He recently, October 2002, accused Syria of having a nuclear program so that they can attack Syria after Iraq or Iran. He must have forgotten that Israel has several hundred nuclear warheads, some of which are thermonuclear weapons, according to recent intelligence from the United States Air Force. David Wormser, Special Assistant to John Bolton, the Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security. Wormser also worked at the AEI with Pearl and Bolton. His wife, Merav Wormser, along with Colonel Yigal Karman, formerly of Israeli Military Intelligence, co-founded the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MIMRI, a Washington-based Israeli outfit which distributes articles translated from Arabic newspapers portraying painting Arabs in a bad light. Elliot Cohen, member of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board under Pearl, and is another extremist pro-Israel advisor. Like Edelman, he often expresses extremist and often ridiculous anti-Arab and anti-Muslim views. More recently, he wrote an opinion article in the Wall Street Journal openly admitting his hatred of Islam, claiming that Islam should be the enemy, not terrorism.
Look, sometimes the word neoconservative is used when what they really would like to say is
Siberian hermits.
They being people who use that kind of language. And as
Siberian,
I find it offensive. There are two things that are despicable about it. The first is the imputation of dual loyalties. What they really would like to say is
Siberian.
Of dual loyalties. What they really would like to say is
the family of Siberian hermits who didn't know that World War II took place.
Mel Sembler, president of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, a prominent Siberian hermit Republican and former national finance chairman of the Republican National Committee. The Export-Import Bank facilitates trade relationships between U.S. businesses and foreign countries, specifically those with financial problems. Steve Goldsmith, senior advisor to the president and Bush's
Siberian
domestic policy advisor. He also served as liaison in the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, White House OFBCI, within the Executive Office of the President. He was the former mayor of Indianapolis. He is also friends with Israeli Jerusalem Mayor Ehud Olmert and often visits Israel to coach mayors on privatization initiatives. A number of other dual Israeli citizens serving in our government are Adam Goldman, White House's special liaison to the
Siberian
community, Joseph Gildenhorn, Bush campaign's special liaison to the
Siberian
community. He was the D.C. finance chairman for the Bush campaign, as well as campaign coordinator and former ambassador to Switzerland. Christopher Gersten, principal deputy assistant secretary, administration for children and families at HHS. Gersten was the former executive director of the Republican
Siberian
Coalition, husband of labor secretary. Mark Weinberger, assistant secretary of housing and urban development for public affairs. Samuel Bodman, Deputy Secretary of Commerce. He was the chairman and CEO of Cabot Corporation in Boston, Massachusetts. Bonnie Cohen, Undersecretary of State for Management. Ruth Davis, Director of Foreign Service Institute, who reports to the Office of Undersecretary for Management. This office is responsible for training all Department of State staff, including ambassadors. Daniel Kurtzer, Ambassador to Israel. Cliff Sobel, Ambassador to the Netherlands. Stuart Bernstein, Ambassador to Denmark. Nancy Brinker, Ambassador to Hungary. Frank Lavin, Ambassador to Singapore. Ron Weiser, Ambassador to Slovakia. Mel Sebler, Ambassador to Italy, mentioned earlier. Martin Silverstein, Ambassador to Uruguay. Lincoln Bloomfield, Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. Jay Lefkowitz, Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of the Domestic Policy Council. Ken Millman, White House Political Director, and Brad Blakeman, White House Director of Scheduling. Michael Chertoff is now the Director of Homeland Security. Prior to his appointment as Director, he oversaw the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice till July of 2001. He is the man behind the investigation of 9/11, or lack of investigation, as it were. Chertoff was the U.S. prosecuting attorney for the District of New Jersey. Michael Chertoff is the person who had control of the evidence and prosecution of the first bombing of the World Trade Center. Chertoff's father is a man by the name of Gershon Baruch Chertoff, who happens to be a Talmudic rabbi. Michael Chertoff's uncle, Mordecai, is also a rabbi. Michael's grandfather was a very well-known teacher of the Talmud in New York City. Chertoff's sister was the head of Hadassah, the women's branch of the Zionist Organization of America. She went to a Hebrew university before Israel was even a state. The Chertoff family was one of the founding families of the State of Israel. Michael Chertoff's aunt worked works with the Zionist movement in London, Chicago, and New York City. Chertoff's power over domestic security is enormous at this point. He is the head boss of departments like the TSA, or Transportation Security Administration, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, U.S. Immigration, U.S. Secret Service, FEMA, and the corresponding detention camps ran by FEMA, U.S. Coast Guard, federal law enforcement, training centers, Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, National Cyber Security Center, to name a few. Chertoff has direct access to the Department of Justice and the FBI because he has many
Siberia
cohorts in strategic positions throughout these departments. It has been a guarded secret for quite some time that Michael Chertoff was the author of the Patriot Act, a bill edited by the Din that effectively nullifies the Constitution of the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. It was originally common knowledge that Ashcroft was the author of the so-called Patriot Act, but it was Chertoff who engineered this traitorous bill. It should also be noted that Chertoff has direct access to every single police and sheriff department in the country because since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, they have appointed people in every police department to have a liaison for the DHS. This dual citizen of Israel, with obvious loyalties not to the United States, will be in direct control of events as they happen if martial law is ever declared on Americans.
Also for the investigators who are investigating different types of offenses.
By utilizing all of these assets, law enforcement is now able to deploy their resources more effectively. By targeting patrols to known hotspots of criminal activity, officers now have the vital information that can make a big difference. With all of the positives that we have spoken of in this program, fusion centers have come under scrutiny. Due to the large amount of personal information processed by fusion centers, it is easy to understand how many Americans might feel apprehensive about the idea of an all-knowing government database. The American Civil Liberties Union published a report in December of 2007 highlighting some of the possible privacy and civil liberty infringements stemming from fusion centers. In their report, they focused on 5 key areas:
ambiguous lines of authority, private sector participation, military participation, data fusion,
and excessive secrecy. While Lieutenant Thomason understands this concern, he points out that fusion centers are limited to what personal information they can access.
Now there have been some problems as these things have evolved of defining roles, having developed an adequate, open, transparent privacy policy. Fusion centers, local police, by statute, cannot look at it. We don't look at anything, can't look at anything that doesn't have a criminal nexus to it. If someone is not suspected, reasonably suspected, of being involved in criminal activity, I can't look at them, and I shouldn't be able to look at them. We are here as peace officers and to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States. In Dallas, we have a privacy policy, and we are going to invite the ACLU in to look at it and address any concerns that they may have with it.
You may be thinking that Dallas is a big department, so of course they can afford to have a fusion center. But the truth is, you do not have to be a big department to benefit from a fusion center.
A 5-man department can do the same thing. They don't have to have supercomputers as long as they change that process. If there's someone out there that if I need data or if I need information, there's going to be a way in the near future to get it, whether you run it through the state, and this is all done electronically. It's not manpower intensive at all.
Everyone, I think, needs to be involved in that process. Not everyone needs a fusion center. Is ours, you know, it's more of a tactical intelligence center, to be honest. Fusion centers are probably going to be
the way or the future for policing.
I believe that
once agencies see the benefit of fusion centers, then they're going to want to either send personnel from their department into a fusion center to be a liaison, or
maybe step up their own fusion centers.